Aloha and welcome to Transform Hawaii Government's Digital Talk Story session, where I reach out to state leaders and ask them about their perspectives on government IT transformation. And it is my pleasure today to welcome Chief Justice Mark Recktenwald to our latest series. Welcome, CJ.
Christine, thank you so much for having me today, and thank you to Transform Hawaii Government for all it's doing in our community and on behalf of making government more efficient, responsive, and accessible.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm really looking forward to this conversation. And so why don't we just dive right in? And one of the first questions I have, of course, is around the pandemic that's ongoing. How has COVID-19 impacted the delivery of government services from your perspective?
Well, it's literally been transformative. So, before the pandemic, we had a lot of initiatives that were aimed at using, electronic means of communication to make us more effective and accessible. Electronic filing of documents, for example, is one of them. But the pandemic forced us to completely rethink who we are. And as you know, courts bring people together. So sometimes we can have 100 people in a courtroom in one morning for a crowded traffic docket. So as soon as we began understanding what was involved with the pandemic and the risks of bringing people together, we, like judiciaries across the country, examined how to incorporate remote proceedings into what we do. And so basically we adopted a strategy of trying to move as many proceedings as possible onto remote platforms while keeping those core proceedings that have to be done in person, which would be criminal jury trials and a few other things, but move as much as we could remotely just to minimize the number of people who come into our courthouses. And since August of last year, we've had 360,000 remote proceedings across the state. And, really before
That's
then,
incredible.
we had remote hookups, hardwired remote hookups to the state hospital or maybe the prisons. But now using a Zoom platform, we're literally doing 20,000 remote hearings a month statewide. So it's really transformed who we are. I think made us more accessible and made it easier for people to engage with the courts because they don't have to drive to the courthouse, park, spend a morning waiting in court, get childcare. They can access the court remotely using a Zoom platform if they have that technology. And that's an important caveat, is we have to make sure people can actually meaningfully access because they have the technology and they're not facing barriers such as language access issues. But for those people who have the technology and can engage, it's a great convenience.
Well, thank you so much. And it is incredible how many sessions that you've had so far since the pandemic. And while I don't know if the pandemic will ever officially be over or there's some version of getting back to a new normal, when that occurs, how do you think that will impact the lessons learned for the court system? Do you go back to in person? Are you thinking of a hybrid, or what has the experience sort of taught you moving forward?
I think we've tried to be very mindful of assessing what folks' reaction have been. We did a detailed poll of the Hawaii State Bar Association to find out what lawyers thought about the system, and a lot of them, the majority were very, very positive, or at least somewhat positive about the experience. So what we've tried to do is map out a strategy to keep remote proceedings as part of who we are going forward, realizing we have to assess, again, the digital divide, language access issues, whether there are any impacts on the fairness of proceedings. And what we're doing now is we're trying to develop rules to identify those hearings that might be presumptively remote versus those that might be presumptively in person, and give the judge the ability to move a case from one side to the other, but to try to give people some sense of what we're going to be doing going forward. But clearly, doing hearings remotely is here to stay.
Yeah, and it's very complementary to our island state, and it does provide accessibility to those that would otherwise have to travel a lot. And so I'm really excited about the benefits of government government transformation and the benefits of the pandemic and the lessons that it's taught us about how fast we can move to reach out to our community and leverage technology. And we've shown that we can do that. So thank you.
We didn't have much choice. We had to. And that's what the pandemic, it was a horrible time, but it had this one, this window of opportunity for us to transform who we are. It's something we'd already been doing, so we had already begun developing, for example, an online dispute resolution platform in our small claims court, so people can file and engage in mediation and remotely without having to physically come to a courthouse. So we had already started doing that. We were doing electronic reminders. As I said, we've moved towards, we've been migrating to a new case management system that includes electronic filing. And really the last big piece of that puzzle is going to be in just 2 months, our family court civil cases are going to, we're going to roll out electronic filing there. So we were already in the middle of that transformation. We have to be, because, folks expect something different from their government now. And, courts are traditionally places where you come to a building, you sit and you wait for your case to be called, but people expect a more responsive, I think their government to be more responsive and to not have to spend a whole morning to get a case heard, particularly a small claims case, a traffic case. So what the potential of electronic filing in these systems is making us more accessible to the public. And that's really, it's something we've emphasized now for a long time, is access to justice, actually enabling people to meaningfully be part of the system. And, again, people will just opt out. If it's a small case, they're going to have to come in multiple times, spend a whole morning, park downtown, get a babysitter. They're just going to say, you know what, I'm just going to let it go. I'll pay the ticket. I won't seek this reimbursement, whatever it is. They'll just shrug their shoulders. And that's something we've been working hard to reduce. And that's, I think, the direction this is moving. This jumped us even faster in that direction.
And access to government services is so important, especially at a time when it can be easy to stay home and to not reach out to the community. I think one of the negative effects of the pandemic is we've sheltered in place for so long, especially our youth. And I have twins that are 14 years old, that we want them to connect to their friends and their friends in school and their neighbors in person, because that's so critical. Or if not in person, at least face to face. So that accessibility is really critical. And it sounds like you are implementing a whole bunch of wonderful programs that really enable that to happen. And thank you so much for doing that, because connecting to our community is so important. And just, I wanted to jump back into some of your perspectives about modernization. And it seems like you are well on your way, but what have been the biggest hurdles to modernize, and what are the biggest opportunities?
Again, I think, to me, you want to be sure that what you're doing is not leaving people out, so, I mean, a lot of folks are well connected, they have broadband, they have devices, but there are people who don't, and so that's something we really tried to ensure, that we had places where folks could go to gain access remotely, to publish good information about how to access remote proceedings. Language access has been a huge emphasis for us, and we have a lot of folks in this community who don't speak English as a first language, and that's not inconsistent with a tech-based approach, but it can be a little harder, to work through an interpreter on a remote proceeding. So those are the things I think we need to be really mindful of, which is maximizing the opportunities to engage people, but not leave anybody out, and certainly not to in some way affect the outcome of a case because it's being done remotely rather than in person. And one thing that we've really emphasized, I'll just mention, because you mentioned your twins, we've used technology to make ourselves more accessible. So a lot of proceedings are available on Zoom. People can watch what's happening on Zoom, and we have information about the logins on our website. And for our Hawaii Supreme Court, we began holding oral arguments remotely at the start of the pandemic. And that actually, we had almost 500 people log in to watch one of those arguments, which is a case from Maui. I don't think most of those people, probably the vast majority, would not have been able to come here in person, yet they could watch the argument live. And so it's really made, it's made it easier for people to watch what we do. Now, we are going to go back to in person, but critically, we've decided to live stream what we do. So we hadn't done that before. So that's a great example of, attitudes changing, so we're going to go back to in person because we think it's important for people to be able to see their Supreme Court face to face, but we're also going to live stream what we do. And then we've been getting out to, we go out into the community with high schools, and that's been a really important program we call Courts in the Community, which was an in-person program. We've adopted that to be remote for the last 2 times. We've been across the state. What's the remote platform has enabled us to bring students from different high schools together in one proceeding. So they learn about the case, they see us argue the case, and then we do a Q&A with them. They can do a Q&A with the lawyers. And, we've had students from Molokai High School, which is really great, Oahu High Schools together in one. So, they're going, again, we're going to try to get back to in person, but maybe we'll do a hybrid version. That's something we're thinking about, where, perhaps we'll go to one high school, say on Maui, but the other schools could participate remotely while we're still moving forward through the pandemic. But the bottom line is to make us more accessible. And that's a real emphasis for the judiciary. We have a new commission called the PACE Commission that Chief Judge Lisa Ganoza is leading. And their whole mission is to facilitate people understanding our democracy and the role of the courts in that democracy. And that's critical. And I think that's really what I hope technology is going to enable us to let people see what we do and build confidence in who we are and the integrity of the system.
Absolutely, CJ. And we do need to keep those programs going. I was talking to a group of juniors and seniors last night that are going through Center for Tomorrow's Leaders, CTL, and it's a great program. And are you familiar with that program? You're
talk to them every year.
Okay, great.
Every year. Yeah, they're great.
Well, it was my first time, and I had asked them because I was in the theme of government service. So I asked them if they were interested in engaging in their sort of civic engagement, and they weren't really quite sure how to answer that. There were a few that, yes, I'd like to go into public policy. Yes, I'd like to, consider being a lawyer, but others were on the fence and they weren't sure how they could engage and how they could participate. And I just had a wonderful conversation with them, and they are tomorrow's leaders. Yeah. And so they're completely digital. They're brought up in a digital world. And so it's looking for ways like the educational programs that you've talked about, and how can we connect tomorrow's leaders to inspire them to be civically engaged, to understand how government works, I think is just so critical. And so I'm glad that we were both a part of that program.
Yeah, I think it's a mix of, in person and remote technology, and there was a meeting here recently, a group called the American Judicature Society, about civic engagement, about the role of the courts. We had Justice Sotomayor virtually for about an hour, and students from the Priory. And, she's passionate about, finding new ways and using digital platforms and other techniques to be able to reach out and inform our young people about our democracy, about what courts do, what the rule of law means. And, again, doing it in person and coming to a student school. We've been to a Waianae High School, Waipahu, Konawaina, Kauai Community College. We go to, sometimes we'll be in a school, sometimes we'll be in a gym, sometimes we'll be in a university, and all the students from the east side of Hawaii come to watch. And it's an actual oral argument. So it's not a mock proceeding. It's a real case. And the lawyers in that community go out to the classrooms of the students who are going to participate and watch the argument and teach them about the case and what the issues are, what the lawyers are going to be arguing, and what the judges or justices' role is. And, the students are amazed when you get them engaged and they actually understand oh, this is what this case is about. Why did he argue this? I would argue that. And you know, they suddenly see that their ideas have validity. I think sometimes the lawyers will do a mock or a practice oral argument with the students. Then they watch us. And I'll tell you, the first time we did this, we went to Farrington. You know, after the argument, a student walked up to me and he pointed to Simeon Akoba, one of my colleagues, who is just, you know, an iconic figure in our legal community. And he looked at him and he pointed to Justice Akoba and said, you know, he asked the same question I asked. And to me, when we did the practice argument, to me, you know, that student felt like, hey, you know, I got something to say. I have a point of view. I had the same insight that person who's, you know, a leader of our legal community had. And, you know, that kind of moment of realizing, you know, this is how the system works. My idea is if I work hard, think hard, and critically, I have something to say that's, you know, that's just as valid as, you know, the leaders of our community. That's a very powerful moment.
Yes, and how empowering for them to be a part of that experience. And that, I'm so glad that the court system, I'm actually learning the scope of the outreach that you do into the community, which is inspirational. I hope my kids have the opportunity to experience that someday, and I will show them our video, and so that they actually learn more about the great programs that you're doing.
Yeah, it's great. It's super. You know, again, you can talk about it in the abstract forever, but when someone actually sees it and they understand what's happening, it's a very powerful moment. And, you know, another comment I've gotten is, you know, hey, you guys asked really tough questions of the government. You know, that was a really interesting, it was a criminal case. And, you know, it was a case about somebody who had stolen property from a truck. He was hiding in a ditch. And there were questions around whether the identification had been done properly. We asked a lot of tough questions of the government. And this student came up to me and said, hey, I was surprised. You asked a lot of tough questions of the government lawyer. And to me, what that said is, I think he assumed that we would just go along with what the government said, because, you know, you've got the state of Hawaii on one side, and you've got a guy lying face down in a ditch hiding on the other side.
Yeah.
And, you know, we asked tough questions of both sides, you know, so everybody got it. I think the message was, hey, you get a fair shake. It doesn't matter who you are, you're going to get a fair shake from the system.
Yeah.
Again, I could talk about it for days, but letting somebody see it in reality, in person, I think is incredibly powerful. And that's what we need to do across our government. To me, we need to help our young people understand, hey, this is how I can have an impact. This is how it actually works. It's a system we should trust. I've seen it and I believe in it, you know, and that's, boy, I'll tell you now, and, you know, given sort of the concerns about our democracy, I think we need to use every tool in our disposal, digital, in person, whatever it is, to reach especially our young people, but our entire community, to show this is who we are. And we're worthy of trust, and we have flaws, but we can get better. Watch us, evaluate us, tell us how we're doing, and then hold us accountable. But, you know, we are worthy of your trust. I think that has to be the message. Anyway, I hope that that's why I'm really excited about what Transform Hawaii Government does.
Well, thank you. And I really appreciate you sharing your perspective, CJ. And it's been a very inspirational conversation that we've had. And it inspires me that it is important to be civically engaged. And, you know, you are an example of saying we want the public to hold us accountable, you know, and that takes all of us working together to do that. And I agree, our democracy has been tested. And one way to build stronger relationships is to have those conversations, to reach out to our community members of all ages, inside and outside of government, and create that strong network together. So thank you. And I know our time, I'd love to talk to you more, but I know our time is coming up soon. So I have one last question for you,
Sure.
CJ. Is that when you're given the opportunity for downtime, and I hope that you have some downtime in all the programs that you're implementing, how do you like to enjoy it?
Well, for sure, spending time with my family. So, you know, wife, grandkids, son, you know, dogs, cats, whatever, you know, just go home and hang out and be with my family. And, you know, that's you know, especially with the pandemic and watching what's happening around the world in our community, I think, I value even more those moments when we can just hang out, do little things together and enjoy life together and look at the, go look in the backyard, look at the birds and
Yeah.
enjoy life. So, that's what I try to do.
Those simple pleasures in life go a long way and are very appreciated now coming out of the pandemic. Well, thank you very much, Chief Justice Mark Recktenwald. It's been a pleasure talking with you and learning about all the programs that you're doing and how you're able to leverage technology to really support the people of Hawaii. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Christine, for the opportunity to be here today.
Aloha.
Aloha.